Hi, I'm James Wilson, Director of Customer Success at Diff Blue. And I'm going to give you a webinar today on why does everyone love automated testing? This is a great question, and we're going to have a look at what does automated testing do, what problems does it solve, and what problems doesn't it solve. So let's have a look at what we're going to cover today. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about quality assurance. Why do we have it? And what's the relationship between testing and quality assurance? A little bit look at some different bug types, and then have a look at how automated testing can help. So we're really going to start off by setting the scene, and then talking about the automated testing, and finally finishing up with some of your questions. So let's step back away from testing and automation to start with and think about what's the goal of quality assurance or QA. Fundamentally, QA is a cost center to a business. So there's got to be some return at the end of it. And the return is typically around reducing support costs, maintaining the company's reputation, or fundamentally about making sure that good quality products get into the field. And one of the important things to remember about quality assurance is that it's relevant throughout the software development lifecycle, all the way from inception through to delivery. So, what does testing have to do with it? Testing is really part of quality assurance. It's not all of quality assurance, and it's not everything that quality assurance is. Typically, testing will occur after implementation. So it's all about validating, does the solution that's been provided meet the requirements? And really it's looking at trying to find bugs by looking at the change in behavior. So we can look at regression bugs, things where a pre-existing behavior has changed. We can look at security bugs where someone's able to access some information or impact a system where they shouldn't be able to. Or new feature bugs where we have introduced a problem with something that didn't exist before. So it's a brand new feature and a brand new bug. Now on this slide I've listed out regression, security and new feature bugs in that order because I see them as being more important the higher up the list you go. So we all know that security bugs are interesting, they're sexy, they're newsworthy. Everyone loves a good story about a company that lost your credit card details. But for your reputational risk as a company, in my opinion, regression bugs are even worse. And they're even worse because they impact your customers' day-to-day lives. You have just released a new version of your product, you've either deployed it to your SaaS solution or someone's upgraded their on-premise environment, and suddenly whatever they did before stops working. You've now impacted their business. They are going to be on the phone to your support line going, I can't do anything. My world has stopped working. Whereas a bug in a new feature, well, they upgrade, they try out a new feature and go, yeah, that didn't work very well, and they carry on with their day-to-day life. So one of the areas where testing can help by looking at the change in behavior of the product is really in the regression bugs, because that's the area where you're going to impact your customer's ability to do what they want to do. So I've talked a little bit about why I think regression bugs are much worse than other types of bugs. And actually, here's a news article from back in 2011. And this is one that I'm particularly, I get particularly excited about because I was actually late to work on the 2nd of January 2011 because my alarm didn't go off. And I kind of woke up in a real big panic. And where are we now? 2019, and I have not used a reoccurring alarm on an iPhone for 8 years because I don't trust their ability to keep that feature working. So if you talk about erosion of trust, user dissatisfaction, I have not used a feature on an iPhone for longer than I did use it because they eroded that trust. And full disclaimer, I am a bit of an Apple fan, so I'm not bashing them anyway. I still have an iPhone, I still think it's a great product, but there's one feature that they've broken actually 2 or 3 times, which I have no trust in anymore. So what can we do about this? I've painted a pretty bleak picture. And the first thing to think about here is really about how can we do testing? How can we do testing for regression bugs? And this is really where automation comes in. You don't want to spend your expensive, high-quality human effort on testing, does your feature still do what it did yesterday? You want to ask a computer to do that. You want to have an automated test. Not only do you save your human resource to doing testing that's more appropriate to a human, like exploratory testing, you're also able to move the testing to earlier in the cycle. If the developer knows that they've broken a feature before they even merge the code in, it's impacting less people. It's only impacting that developer. And they go away and fix the bug and then introduce their change into the code base. So by doing regression testing in an automated way, using CI tools, you can catch bugs immediately. You can give that instant feedback to the developer. The other thing I've mentioned on this slide is about predictable test coverage. One thing humans are great at is not being predictable. If you are testing a feature for the 100th time in 2 years because you do the same set of manual regression tests every release, you are going to slightly change the way you do things, you're going to get bored, you're going to switch off to what's happening, and you actually get to a point where you're less likely to find the bug than an automated test is. The quote here, I really like this quote. If you don't like unit testing your product, most likely your customers won't like testing it either. To the developers out there, if you're not prepared to test your change, QA aren't going to like you. You're going to be handing over poor quality code. They are going to be testing it and feel like they're wading through treacle, trying to dance around bugs to actually get to the answer of what's this feature like. If as a company you don't like testing, well, yeah, your customers really aren't going to like you, because the first person executing your code, the first person who's really trying out your product is your customer. Sure, there are plenty of people out there who are willing to take on beta testing, who are willing to take early products to market and really be at the cutting edge, but the vast majority of people really just want their code to work. So I think this quote really sums things up. Okay, so let's move on to Q&A, and we've already got a few questions coming in. So let's start off with, who can benefit the most from using automated testing? I want to say everyone. I really do want to say everyone. I think if we look through the kind of life cycle of development and think about developers writing code, I'm not quite starting at the beginning, but I'll start with the developers. Developers writing code, they know if they've broken something. The CI system tells them. So they can address problems earlier. This means that they're not having to shift context, they're not having to stop working on something to move on to fixing a bug. They're in the zone. testers or quality assurance people who are looking at the kind of end-to-end testing or user acceptance testing, they can really benefit from automated testing because they know there's a level of quality in the product before they start working. They can be confident that what they're doing is exploring new territory, is really looking at the things that are most interesting and most useful to have a human look at. Checking that if you put a bad username and password into a login screen that it still produces an error. That's not very exciting for someone who's doing testing, but it's something that a computer can do easily. The business, the commercial aspect, if you shift left your finding and fixing of bugs, you can deliver software with more confidence, more quickly to your customers. That can only be a good thing from a commercial revenue perspective. Does automated testing make manual testing totally obsolete? Absolutely not, is the very simple answer here. There is certain types of testing that humans are much, much better at than computers. I've mentioned earlier exploratory testing. One thing that a computer's very bad at is spotting where something slightly weird happened. And when you are doing some exploratory testing and you are kind of working through a product and you kind of get this hunch, this sort of spidey sense of what if, and computers don't have that. So you can get some really interesting bugs from having expert testers. And that's without even mentioning specific testing skills like penetration testing. So there's always going to be a need for people to do that manual testing. And one thing automated tests are very, very poor at is testing something the first time round. The cost of running an automated test once is a lot higher than running a manual test. So you only get that return on investment once your automation has run many, many times. So in my mind, your manual testing should be right at the bleeding edge of your product, and your automated testing should be worrying about everything that has happened or has worked in the past continues to work. What are the first steps for getting started with automated testing? This is actually a nice introduction to the next webinar in this series, which talks about why are we so bad at it? And really, I think one of the first steps is set some time aside and produce an automated test. Just one. Because just building one simple automated test is going to check that you've got the infrastructure in place, you've got the right tools in the CI system, you're using the right testing technologies for your product, for what you're trying to achieve, and that is going to take more than enough time to do that first test case. And then, you gradually set some time aside, maybe a Friday afternoon, or as one company I saw, a Wednesday afternoon, all the developers worked on tests for an afternoon. Or even just, finding some time in a sprint, setting aside a couple of story points for getting your infrastructure up and running. So, yeah, really it is the hardest thing is getting started. Okay, so I think that's all we have time for today. And if you have any further questions or want to comment about our webinar, then you can reach out to us through our website or through my Twitter account or DiffBlue's Twitter account. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about why are we so bad at automated testing in our next webinar. So keep an eye on DiffBlue's Twitter account and our website to find out when that will be.